So here we're going to be talking about least common denominators. Now the denominator is the bottom number of a fraction. So 4 and 6 would be the denominators, or how many times something was divided up. Now what we're going to be doing later on is adding and subtracting fractions that have uncommon denominators, meaning that the number at the bottom are not the same. So what you have to do in order to do that is you have to find a common denominator. You have to find the number that both of these could make and make an equivalent fraction with them in order to add or subtract them. But that's for later. So first of all, in order to find this common denominator, the first thing you want to do is like down here at the bottom here where we have a half and an eighth. So the first thing you always want to do is look at the numbers, look at your denominators. You have a 2 and an 8. You want to ask yourself, can 2 make 8? Is 8 a multiple of 2? And a multiple means something that would be the answer if you times it out, like to a multiplication. So, can 2 make 8? Well, yeah, if I do my 2's, 2, 4, 6, 8, yeah, 2 could make 8. Now, 8 is going to be 8, 16, 24. But the very first thing that 8 could make is itself. So it's 8. So you wouldn't have to do this part here where you're listing all the multiples if you just stop and think, okay, well, can 2 make 8? Yes. So since 8, the first thing that 8 can make is itself is 8, then that would be my least common denominator. So both of these would become 8s. Okay? Now, sometimes that won't work. Like here, if I said, okay, I've got 3 numbers. Well, I've got 6. I'm looking at my biggest number, 6. Well, 3 can make 6, but 4 can't make 6. So I can't say 6 is going to be my first answer. So, but what I can do is I can start with my biggest number and I can list the multiples. Okay, well, I've got 6, 12, 18. I know all those numbers are multiples of 6. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, I know 4 can't make 6, but can 4 make 12? Yes, 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, can 3 make 12? Well, yes, 3 times 4 is 12. So then, because that's the first number that all these numbers can make, 3, 4, and 6 can all make 12. So that's going to become my least common denominator. Okay, now another way that you can do this if you don't just start with this and go up, is you can just make a list of the multiples like they did up here. So you got 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. And you've got 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. So what you do, you just make a list of them and you say, okay, what is the first pair that both of these can make? Well, the first thing that both of these make is 12, right? So the least common denominator would be 12. All right, now there's one more way of doing this, and that's using our prime factorization. Now you could actually mess up here if you was doing this, and or even if you was doing this here, and you might skip a number. Okay, you might say, well, what can 6 and 4 both make? Well, they can both make 24 because that's what 4 times 6 is, right? But that wasn't the first number they could make. So you could use 24, but the only thing is when you got your answer to that problem, you would end up having to reduce that problem because you didn't use the least common multiple. So absolute way you can absolutely be certain that you've got the least common denominator is to use this method here, which is our prime factorization, like we did when we were finding our greatest common factor. So you use your prime numbers, you bring it down till you get prime numbers. So in this case, 2 and 2, that first shot was primes. And then 6, 2 times 3, both of those are primes. Now the difference with using this way is that when we were doing it with greatest common factor, we were looking for a pair that was in common because it was a common factor. But in this case, we're looking for the least common multiple. So the difference here is we're looking for which one of these has the factor the most times in it. So in this case, 2, we have 2 2's here and we have 1 2 here. So we would use this part. We wouldn't use this one because we have more 2's on this side. So we would just put our 2's over here. And then we have a 3. Well, we don't have a 3 over here, so obviously we're just going to put that 3 over here because that's, it's one time. So we have 2 times 2, which would give us 4, and then 4 times 3 would give us 12. So in this case, 12 is our common denominator. Another thing, like down here when you got a third and a fifth, is, again, you could list them all out, or you could go ahead and stop and think, okay, well, 3 and 5 are prime numbers, right? So that means I can just times 3 times 5 together and get 15. And 15 is going to be my answer because those both were prime numbers. So any of these ways will work to find the least common denominator. But like I said before, always start here like we did on C. Stop and think, check to make sure that your smaller denominator isn't a factor of your bigger denominator. So, like make sure that 2 can't make 8. If this was 2 and 11, then we know 2 cannot make 11. So we would go on to one of these other methods. But if you come up with a situation and it's like 2 and 8, or if it had been 4 and 8, then you would have automatically known that 8 would have been the first number. It would have been your least common denominator because that was the first number they both could make. All right, so hopefully this helps you.